Welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast, CFML News Edition, where we keep you up to date with everything going on in the ColdFusion community. We'll share the latest news on events, releases to engines, frameworks, libraries, and tools, as well as spotlighting quality content from the community.
Hello and welcome to the Modernize or Die podcast CFML News Edition. Today is August 25th, 2020. I'm your host, Eric Peterson, and with me is Brad Wood. Hi, Brad.
If you're going to let me announce myself, I was going to say I was Eric Peterson and fight with you about which one was Eric, but you really let the cat out of the bag. Yeah, I'm Brad Wood. I admit it. You got me.
I know. Two gingers. It's kind of hard to tell. Well, welcome. We want to thank our sponsor, Ortus Solutions, for giving us a chance to do this podcast. You can get live training from the makers of your favorite box product, including CommandBox, which there is a 2-day workshop coming up this week, CommandBox Zero to Hero. And you can also support us by subscribing on CFcast, which there is new free and paid content every week. Lastly, we'd like to thank our Patreon supporters. We are at the 59% mark for fully funding all of our Modernize or Die podcasts. You can find more at patreon.com/ortussolutions. Thank you for supporting us.
And once we're fully funded, we get to get a desk that actually fits our bodies. Is that how that works?
A virtual desk. They cost a lot of money, you know.
Yeah. You have to go to IKEA. Assembling a virtual desk is just, it's crazy.
And it's just as frustrating as assembling a real life IKEA desk.
Insert tab B into slot A. So what's the big news this week?
Okay, yeah, let's get on to that. The big news this week is ColdBox 6 was released. We're excited about this one.
Yay.
We have a blog post for you on the Ortus Solutions blog, but this is the ColdBox and its standalone libraries, WireBox, CacheBox, LogBox. It's been quite the journey to get here. I think it's been about a year, and this has a lot of awesome features, most of which are not breaking changes. So I know I've upgraded a couple sites now to ColdBox 6, and it's taken me maybe 10 minutes each site. I usually forget to read through the docs and I miss one thing and wish I did. The migration guide is very thorough. You won't have any trouble if you're using that.
Yeah, make sure you read the migration guide. You know, there's a few things that Luis changed, but for the most part, it's kind of like renaming some common functions to work to be a different name, which, you know, sit down with your IDE, get some extended find and replace. You can knock some of that stuff out in a couple minutes. So don't be scared by any of that. All the core conventions still work the same. We've just done a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And by we, I mostly mean Luis has done a lot of behind the scenes stuff for, you know, threading and asynchronicity and stuff that you get a lot of benefit just out of upgrading.
Right. Now, if you have avoided doing any asynchronous work because it's a little cumbersome in CFML, ColdBox 6 has your back. It is both powerful, but also much easier to get started with than handling all the threading yourself, using the Java concurrent libraries, the completable futures. Docs have been updated with some examples, and I know there is a CFcast course coming that will dive into that as well.
So one of the things I'm excited about is you mentioned that the standalone libraries, WireBox, CacheBox, LogBox, and which one didn't I say? Or is that all of them? Anyway, BoxBox. Those all have a major update as well. So CommandBox doesn't use ColdBox, but it does use WireBox. And so I'll be able to update the WireBox version inside of CommandBox now with the latest that has just came out, which means the whole asynchronous library that Eric just mentioned will be finally part of CommandBox for us to tap into and use from the command line. So you get this trickle-down effect of features that will work their way into the rest of our libraries, which I'm excited about.
That's awesome. And I know one of my personal favorites is there's a new debugging template based on the old Whoops template. So go ahead and uninstall Whoops, upgrade to ColdBox 6. I think you'll love it.
Out of the box. Whoops, Eric did it again. He played with your code, got lost in the game.
Oh man, too many puns from Brad. I think that means it's time to move on to the next piece of news.
Well, we're not going to be in Vegas for CF Summit this year, which is where Britney Spears is, so we got to get in our Brittany somehow, I guess. That's enough for the month.
All right, the next piece of news, the ColdFusion 2020 beta, aka Project Stratus, is now available on ForgeBox. So you can start that Adobe at 2020 beta.1, or just tab
Right.
autocomplete because no one has time to do all that typing.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Um, so it's funny because anyway, yeah, the version I tweeted is actually a little bit simplified with that. So if you were on the private alpha version of the pre-release, there's a different way that you use to start your servers that's private, that we talked about in the pre-release forums. But for anyone joining us now or coming from the private pre-release now to the public pre-release, this is just using the normal Adobe slug on ForgeBox because it's public, so it doesn't have to be hidden any longer. And so you don't have to type out the full version. If you actually just do Adobe at 2020-beta, you can leave off all the extra numbers. That'll be enough to actually get whatever the bleeding edge. Or you can just do Adobe at BE. Any of those will all get you that. Now, if you don't specify beta or bleeding edge, you just say, start Adobe CF Engine equals Adobe, you'll still get 2018, the latest stable release. So you do have to ask for the private beta because we wouldn't want people getting that on accident. But we'll keep that updated as more beta builds come out. And yes, John, CFconfig does work with ColdFusion 2020 and has ever since the very first private alpha build came out.
I'll have a little trick in my CI builds where I start a Adobe at BE and a Lucy at BE server in my matrix. So now all my builds will start to test against this. We'll know if we have any problems.
That can be dangerous. Does it fail your build if that engine fails?
The beta builds are only ran on a cron job, so it's just an email to me. It doesn't actually stop me from releasing.
Right on.
I've thought this through.
Yeah, it's tricky. You want to test the bleeding edge of the engines, but it's not necessarily your fault. If those fail, it might be the engine's fault. So whose build should be failed? Yep.
Cool. So go ahead and get playing with that now on ForgeBox. Next up, last week or even 2 weeks now, we've been talking about Mura CMS, and they've announced that they are going closed source to a subscription model. And it fired up Luis on our side, who tweeted out that he was working on ContentBox version 5 with the hashtag free forever. So ContentBox is our open source CMS, and this is Ortus's commitment that this is an open source project. It's free. You don't need to worry about a going subscription service and all of a sudden you can't download it ever again.
Free Forever sounds like a country song. Can we make this happen?
It probably already is a country song.
It'll be a remake. It'll be the ContentBox CMS version. But yeah, Luis has been just cranking over on ContentBox, and we have some upcoming tweets on some of the stuff he's working on. But yeah, it'll remain open source, which is good news for egg lovers.
Some also neat things about ContentBox 5 coming up is with the upgrade to ColdBox 6 and CB Security 2, the performance is about 5 times faster than before. So that's some awesome stuff coming out of ColdBox 6 there. And I believe Luis is also working on some multi-site support. So if you have
that's been one of the, I think probably the biggest asked for features in ContentBox was the ability to have a multi-tenant site under a single installation. And we've never supported it. It was kind of a big change. We never had anybody that we could get to sponsor it, but we're finally putting some effort in, and it's underway. I think Luis has it working locally, so that'll be a helpful push to anybody who might be looking to convert over to ContentBox in the meantime and really needs to have a multi-site, multi-tenant setup.
So for all of you folks that are looking for a alternative to Mura, we got you covered. Okay, in case you missed it, we had an Online CF Meetup this last Thursday. It was a public beta walkthrough of ColdFusion Next or Project Stratus. So Brad, were you able to join that meeting at all?
No, I didn't. I'm already familiar with what was in it since I was on the private alpha of 2020. I'm sure I probably would have still learned a couple things had I watched it, but I was stuck in meetings that day. I am pleased to see that I think most, well, other than some performance things, which is really a carryover from 2018, most of the issues I had in the private alpha, I believe, do appear to be fixed in the first public beta, which is a good thing. Early on, the ColdBox framework didn't even work, so that's why we had those. That's why we had those private alphas to get some of those big bugs out of the way. So I might have to go back and watch the recording and see if there's anything that I missed.
Right. Yep. We will paste a link to the recording in the show notes and in chat. It's on YouTube. One neat thing that I took away from it is it looks like the next CF Builder will be all we had is it will be based on Visual Studio Code. I don't know if that means their own custom packaging of the editor or simply extensions on top of it. But given that most of the ColdFusion community has migrated to that editor, I think that's a great choice.
I mean, I really hope it's just an extension and they don't try to like wrap it up as a separate product because I think that would sound annoying. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I don't really know what their plans are. I mean, because they could have just shipped Eclipse and had an extension, right? But no, they had their own bundle. I think they do it to to try to add more value. But it's a bit more annoying if you just want to have just a regular VS Code that you get from Microsoft with all your other extensions. But we'll see how they
Yeah,
implement it. I'm really hoping they're going to put effort into crap. What's the acronym? Language Server Protocol. Is it LSP? Is that right?
it sounds right.
Yeah, I guess what they had in Eclipse is they had like extensions that could be written in CFML, which was a feature nobody really ever dove that deep into. But it required that you had like a running ColdFusion, server on your machine that it was connected to, which kind of worked, but it was really hacktastic. What would have been better was just embedded CFML running, which I think they have a more chance of doing now with like the CLI and everything.
Hmm.
Um, and so I know that in VS Code, a language can implement the language server protocol or whatever it is, so you can run it. I think it's somewhat similar to like the JSR 223 stuff in Java, but a mechanism for running scripting languages to be able to run CFML code or whatever code inside of VS Code. So it'll be interesting to see if they go down that path, and if they do, how performant it is. Because obviously,
Yeah,
you wouldn't want an extension that runs in CFML code and takes like 5 seconds to boot up every time. So
true.
we'll have to see what they come out with.
I'm optimistic. Most of the Visual Studio Code language bundles have a language server protocol running. Like if you download Go or TypeScript
Hmm.
comes built in, all of those are running against language server protocols. So I'm optimistic and excited to see what they come out with.
I mean, and it's nice to see them listening as well. They've been supporting ColdFusion Builder for a while, which is Eclipse based, even though the usage of it has definitely dwindled, at least per the State of the CF Union survey. And so, VS Code is easily the number one used IDE per that survey, which is only about 500 people that respond to it, but it's the biggest survey we have. So it's nice to see them, um, recognize that and make some changes here. I'm actually pulling up the. Here we go. So what do we have? This is I'm looking on my screen. The 2020 results for the of TerraTech State of the CF Union survey, and Visual Studio Code had 286 respondents, so it by far had the most. Sublime 3 is next, 190 respondents. Notepad++ somehow is a strong third place with 131 respondents. I don't know how, but so ColdFusion Builder, 72 respondents. It's maybe a what? I mean, 286 versus 72. So there's barely more people using Dreamweaver using ColdFusion Builder. So it definitely has not held the captivation of the CFML developers
Right.
in the community. And I don't know if it's because it's Eclipse based or for what reason or not. But anyway, I mean, I think this is a good move and a positive move by Adobe saying, wow, look, pretty much, most of our developers have all kind of centered around tools like VS Code. Um, let's, move over and try to, and, rebuild our offering.
Yeah.
They could have just kept their head down and been like, nope, ColdFusion Builder is going to be based in Eclipse. But they're making some efforts. So kudos to them. I hope it works out well for our sake.
Yeah. I think most people have moved over to something like Sublime or VS Code mainly for the multi-language support. I can't
Hmm.
think of a project that I'm only in ColdFusion. It's
Yeah.
ColdFusion and JavaScript, and I want nice CSS support, and keep
Hmm.
going. So
Yeah.
Docker.
For me, Java is something I do a fair amount of, just enough that I want to have decent support for all of them. Yeah, and it sucks having like two different IDEs. Oh, when I edit Java, I have to
Right.
open up this one. You know,
So,
that's not good.
cool. All right. Well, that was last week's Online CF Meetup, and you can view the recording. There is another one this Thursday, August 27th. It's at 11 a.m. Central Daylight Time. It is how to use the ColdFusion API Manager to modernize your app with Dan Wilson. So we'll throw the link in the show notes and in the chat. That is this Thursday that you can come check that out.
I Maybe I need to watch it. I'm really curious how the API manager would modernize your app.
See, it sounds
Hmm.
perfect for Brad to go watch now.
Well, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, the API manager sits as a a networking proxy out in front of your application, and it might modernize the endpoints of your backend API, but I don't think it wouldn't change your application at all. That's why I'm scratching my head on that one.
He's hooked you. You're going to go watch now to see what you're missing.
Well, I think I know where he's going to go with it because the description says we'll go through how to programmatically add to your existing applications without disruption. And so one of the things you could do is, let's say you want to convert a SOAP API over to REST. You could put the API manager in front, make it look like a REST API. It proxies to a SOAP API in the back end. Then once that's in place, you could actually refactor the app to present that an actual REST API and take out the shim. But that's my guess is what how they're going to sell it. But yes, I have to see what the angle is on that one.
So that's this Thursday, August 27th at 11 a.m. Central Daylight Time. One last, in case you missed it, we had an Ortus webinar last Friday with Javier on BDD tests with TestBox. And you can view the recording of that, and we'll move into our next segment on CF Casts.
CF Cast. We need to
All
have a little like sound that plays, a little like jingle every time we say the word CF Cast. We push a button.
we need to get a soundboard. That will be the next thing after
Mm.
our
When
virtual
we're
desk.
when we're fully funded, we will have a soundboard of jingles.
We're never going to get fully funded now because nobody wants that.
Yeah, people are like no.
So yes, so CF Casts update this week. So first off is this webinar, the BDD test with TestBox. All of the webinars for this year are on CF Casts and are free to watch. Additionally, there are two new videos in the ColdBox Masterclass on model testing and integration testing. So
Nice.
head on over to cfcast.com and subscribe to get access to all of that content and all the upcoming content as well.
Excellent. I mean, this is really the first training site I think for the ColdFusion world that we've had with this kind of quality content. So internally at Ortus, there's a lot of work going on to keep this fresh content going on the site. So please do check it out. Like we mentioned earlier, some of it's free, some of it's paid, but it takes hours and hours to create this. So we really wanted to have quality content for the ColdFusion community. I'm super excited about this site.
Yeah. I can give you some ideas of what's coming up. I know we have a course on making Visual Studio Code awesome for CFML development with Gavin. We have some lessons on CF Config coming up. We have what's new in ColdBox 6. Those are just a few of the courses that are coming.
And I'm not
So,
even doing the CF config ones.
no, you're not. Uh,
That's Grant.
yeah, it's pretty awesome. I've got a sneak peek into all of them. So, you don't want to miss this content. It's something new every week, and it's great. So, all right. Conferences or virtual training slash conferences.
Yeah, everything's kind of virtual now.
So the first one is we mentioned this at the top, but there is a 2-day workshop with Senior Brad here, CommandBox Zero to Hero, this Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, so we still have openings and we need to fill some seats on this. So go beat the bushes and beat your bosses and get the company credit card and get signed up for this. It's going to be 2 days. And I hear a lot of people, Ben the Dell, who say things like, oh, there's so much stuff in CommandBox. I really want to look into it. I just haven't had a chance. I just use it to start and stop servers. This is your chance, people. Like, we're going to talk about everything. We're going to deep dive into everything servers do rather. I can't talk. How do you do the command line, task runners, all that stuff. So get signed up for it. We still have seats we need to fill. That's this Thursday.
All right. And for
And
signing up, oh, go ahead.
oh yeah, we were about to say the same thing. Let's say it in the same time. No, just kidding.
No.
For each of the people who come to the workshop, we'll be offering a free license of our CommandBox Service Manager module, which is one of our paid modules that lets you take your CommandBox servers and create Windows services, Mac, NetD services, Linux systemd services with a single command. So that's our sweetening the deal. We're baiting the kitty.
And one more sweetening the deal: use the coupon code podcast10 for 10% off when you register. John Farrar in the chat asked, will you cover PowerShell? I think the answer is open PowerShell, type box, and then you're good.
Yeah, we're not really go into any particular stuff about the native shells. As long as you can run box in it, then we talk about what you do once you're inside box.
Cool.
So Scott Steinbeck says CommandBox server virus. Is this a suggestion for a new module?
Not quite sure how that one would work out for us.
Yeah, that might be some bad press.
A couple other conferences coming up. We've mentioned now a few times jconf.dev. It is September 30th from 9 to 4 Central Standard Time. It's a free Java conference that you can go register for, and it has some of our favorite peoples like Venkat will be speaking there. And yeah, looks like a great little free conference there.
Can't beat free.
And speaking of free, another one, Adobe ColdFusion Summit 2020. It will be November 17th through the 19th online, and you can sign up at cfsummit.adobeevents.com. So, again, that's the biggest ColdFusion conference of the year, so don't miss that one, especially when it's free. Though I will miss seeing everybody in Vegas. I think that's my favorite part of the Adobe ColdFusion Summit is seeing everybody and talking with everybody.
Yeah, that part really sucks. I can't wait for everything to go back to normal so we can actually see each other again.
On the heels of the ColdFusion Summit, that's where last year they had their Adobe ColdFusion certification. That certification has moved online. We'll drop the blog post and the registration link so you can go watch the online videos and even register to take the exam to become Adobe ColdFusion certified now online. Okay, I think that takes us through our conferences, so that moves us to
blogs, tweets, videos of the week.
Yes, hit it off, Brad.
Well, the first blog here is one we've already talked about, which is the ColdBox 6.0.0 final released. So that's one from Luis talking about all the new stuff in ColdBox 6. So major release of the framework, major improvements in the back end, minor effort to upgrade. So read that and check out the compatibility guide. Do it. People let their ColdBox versions get way behind on apps. I know this. It has to be part of your when you estimate projects, part of that needs to be the time it takes to keep your libraries and things up to date. You have to work it in because your manager, your boss will never want you to spend time updating libraries. They'll say, doesn't the old one work? So make it happen, people.
Yeah, I remember stopping creating tickets that said like upgrade this library and just kind of sneaking it in a normal ticket. It's like, oh yeah, while I'm implementing feature X, I upgraded ColdBox because
yeah,
you put a ticket that says upgrade this library and it's at the bottom of your backlog forever.
Yeah, well there you go. Scott Steinbeck has a good comment in the chat to say it's about security. But yeah, you do get technical debt, as Sean Farrar just pointed out in our chat as well. Before you know it, all of a sudden, you're on ColdBox version 8 versions ago, and now the upgrade path is a tremendous amount of work, and you're missing features, and you're missing security updates. So the easiest way is the little tiny updates as you go.
All right. Okay, Brad. Tell me about query of queries.
You don't want to know about it.
Well, that's true, because my answer to query of queries is don't use it. But tell me about them.
I like query queries and I like to use them. Though they can have limitations. But yes, you're talking about some tweets that I sent out. I've been working with one of our Ortus clients this week who has a huge system that tracks all sorts of data, and a particular page in a system grabs a giant query of data from the database and does a whole bunch of loops and runs queries of queries to kind of pull and parse all the data out. And he's run his site on Adobe ColdFusion for years. The page loads in 3 or 4 seconds. Um, he's been migrating to Lucy, and the page just crawls. The queries are incredibly slow, and under load, it just crashes the server. And so we've been digging into that. And so the Lucy developers have always like told people, don't use queries, they suck. I kind of figured out why they suck, and unfortunately, I think it's kind of a terrible reason. So a lot of people don't realize it, but in Adobe ColdFusion, queries are just a pure Java implementation with just loops and if statements operating on the query object. In Lucy, there's like a half implemented pure Java solution that only supports like the most basic queries. It doesn't support aggregate functions, doesn't support group by, doesn't support having, doesn't support more than one table joined together. And so if you have like the world's simplest query in Lucy, then it'll use the built-in pure Java implementation, but just loops over and modifies the query. But as soon as you have any kind of like vaguely fancy SQL, what Lucy does without you even realizing it is it creates a hypersql database, which is like an in-memory slash file-based database. It creates a hypersql database. It creates a table. It loads all your data from the query object into that table. Then it runs your SQL statement via JDBC against the hypersql database, gets the results back, drops the table, and then says, okay, here's your results. That's sort of a clever workaround that prevented the Lucy developers from needing to like fully implement queries. But if you do it in a loop like 1,000 times on a page, the overhead of all that JDBC traffic and casting data is really slow compared to just in-memory manipulation. And even worse, the hypersql implementation is single-threaded inside of Lucy. The entire thing, for who knows what reason, is just wrapped in a big old synchronized block, which is the equivalent of an exclusive name block in ColdFusion. So only one page, only one thread can run a query at a time on your entire server if those queries have kind of fallen back to that hypersql implementation, which is absolutely horrendous and explains why our client's code was already slow, but as soon as they tried to like refresh the page 5 or 6 times at the same time, the performance just like ballooned out, was technically linearly, but still, that explains some of the absolutely horrible performance that Lucy has, which is kind of frustrating, because I understand that a database is going to be able to do some things better, but I feel like Lucy kind of threw in the towel and went with a sort of an easy but absolutely crappy implementation on that. I did want to say hypersql 20 times, John. Anyway, so yeah, I was able to make this particular code about 75 times faster by identifying which of the queries were kind of falling back to this hypersql implementation. Which, first of all, I had to make a custom build of Lucy with some name the queries to versions that didn't fall back on hypersql, and then just doing loops and manipulating stuff myself. I was able to make the code like 75 times faster. So there actually is very good reason to be aware of complex queries in Lucy, unfortunately. And I'd like to see if some of that can be fixed, because I think some of this could probably be somewhat low-hanging fruit to actually make Lucy a lot better in this area. I don't think it's we've done everything we can, it can't be made any faster. I think it's, yeah, that's pretty crap. You could probably do a few things to make that better. First of all, don't make it single-threaded. That's just atrocious. But second of all, the pure Java implementation in Lucy could probably be enhanced to support some of the basic aggregate functions and group by, which would perform a lot better than the whole hypersql thing. But yeah, it's been a fun little several days I spent this week digging into that and finding out just how slow it was. And of course, I use Fusion Reactor and its profiler to be able to figure out what these queries were doing behind the scenes, and figure out that they were all being blocked by this single-threaded stuff. So beware of the queries. hopefully we can get some changes into Lucy to kind of make that better. But
Yeah, I'd be interested to see because it's always come off to me from the Lucy team as we know this isn't good, but like you're never gonna beat a normal database, so rewrite your code.
I
But they keep
mean,
it around for compatibility, right? Adobe has
that
query of queries, and so Lucy has to have it.
that's the way they look at it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good way. I really like queries, and for smallish data sets and simplish, selects, I think they're incredibly handy. Um, and yeah, a database is going to do better, but I think if this was like a continuum, you're like a database is like the fastest, and I think the current Lucy query is like the slowest possible. I think they could easily get Lucy to where it's a lot closer to the fastest end of the spectrum. And I mean, the proof in the pudding is that Adobe has done this, and the same code with my client performed not like amazingly, but perfectly within like the realm of what was acceptable on Adobe ColdFusion. Adobe's done it. It can be done. It is possible. It has been done at Adobe. Lucy just hasn't done it. It's not they can't do it, just it hasn't been a priority. They haven't done it. So maybe this would be something where the community could help contribute
Yeah.
some fixes and improvements to the query classes. I mean, I've already spent a couple days reading through the Lucy source code. It's kind of deep just because there's a bunch of nonsense happening, but it's fairly straightforward. I can kind of tell what it's doing. I'm actually tempted if I have some time, haha, to see just how hard it would be to add some additional behaviors into the actual Lucy implementation, so it doesn't have to fall back on that HyperSQL database, because it just gets ugly once it does that.
Yeah. Well, there you go, folks. There be dragons.
There be dragons.
All right, let's move into the Ben corner and talk about his post this week about using constants to help clarify Boolean arguments and return values in ColdFusion and JavaScript, and probably any language. But he looked at ColdFusion and JavaScript. I like these posts because it kind of shows the spectrum in programming between readability and conciseness, and he explores it, right? Um, using instead of using true, using a word like filter in or recurse directories to give some more context to it. I'm glad in ColdFusion we have named arguments. It helps a lot in these cases where you have random Boolean flags. But this
Yeah.
is nice when you need to return it or you can't use the name arguments for some reason. So
So one of these examples that Ben has here in the post is he has an array and he's using the filter member function to filter items in the array. So the closure that he provides needs to return true or false for each record to signify whether that record should be included or excluded. So instead of just returning true or false, he returns the variable called filter in or the variable called filter out. And those variables, of course, just contain the values true or false. But yeah, looking at the code, I see, return filter in, return filter out. It's just a little bit more, I don't know, unambiguous as far as what that line of code is doing. Return true is specifically saying keep it, filter it in. Anyway, yeah, it's an interesting idea. Now, they're not really constants as far as any like compiler is concerned. They're really just variables in the variable scope on the page that he happened to type in application, use underscores between them. So it's more like quote constants in quote, like air quotes around them. But I get what he's saying. Using stuff like that. Java does that a lot. I don't get in the habit of doing it in ColdFusion, but in Java it's really common to have, a flag that's a simple string or an integer, but you'll have some, static constant thing at the top of the class that just gives it, a nice readable bit of text, and then you use that text everywhere as a variable. So
yeah, I haven't done that as much with Booleans as we call them magic numbers. When you wanted to
yeah,
say like, if this user has this role and the role is ID, 82, it's like
exactly.
okay, I don't know what that means. So
We used to do that, I guess. An app of mine I used to manage, we had like a utility table. A lot of apps had these, like that generic utility table where you have like a list of options in the drop down and you want to be able to add to them dynamically without changing code. And we use GUIDs in that database. And so our code would have this, if ID equals in this big ugly GUID, right? And people look at it, they're like, what is that GUID? What does that mean, right? So we created some like, service that when it knitted, would like select the entire utility table out and would add this dot, kind of slugs onto it that were all equal to the GUIDs. And then everywhere in our code, we kind of treated them as like static variables. We would say, ID equals utility dot role admin or something, and behind the scenes it was all the GUID. But your code you could look at and you would have like a vague idea of what the heck it did without having to have like the required comment to explain it. And of course, as Uncle Bob would say, if you have to add comments, the code probably could be made cleaner.
Yeah.
That from the book Clean Code.
So Ben ends his post just with the caveat, like, this doesn't mean change all your code. It all needs to be these Boolean flag constants. But you might be able to use this technique where your code is not as clear as you hope it would be. So use it where it helps.
Use it real. I like the pragmaticness, definitely.
Yep. Okay, the next one is from Pete Freitag about cleaning up development disk space from CommandBox. I have to tell you, Brad, I chuckled about this since
Just buy a bigger hard drive, man. Just buy a bigger hard drive. What's the problem?
Since I know how much you love JavaScript and NPM and Node, it just reminded me of all the articles I've read about people saying, I deleted all my old Node modules and now I have 80 gigs back. So, so the idea behind this is CommandBox can download a lot of stuff. The artifacts, a little bit, but I think most of it is servers.
I mean, an Adobe server can easily expand into 500-600 megs sometimes, or even loosely can be 300 or 400 megs for a server. Yeah, right. You start like 3 servers a day. Before you know it, you have like 20 gigs of old servers you don't use anymore.
Right, and I know I looked through mine when I saw this article, and I tend to like run up a new folder and server and ColdBox app to just test something out, and then never clean them up. So I have like testing one over and over again in my servers that I just don't need. So.
Well, yeah, I just bought my first 2 terabyte SSD from Crucial.com yesterday. So maybe we should just ship like a 2 terabyte SSD drive with every CommandBox download.
I was thinking we need some of the prune commands like they have in what's it called, in Docker.
Well, I was just going to say that it wouldn't be too hard. So servers do track the last time they were started. So you could say, what are all the servers that have been started in 6 months?
Yeah.
You could look at the date time modified on artifacts, or just say keep only the last 2 versions. It wouldn't be too hard to write some like prune module in CommandBox that would look for artifacts whose date file was after a certain date, or only keep X number of versions. Forget servers that haven't been started in X number of months. What was the other thing he did? Oh, the temp directory. So the temp folder can be blown away anytime as long as CommandBox isn't running. Those are really the big 3: artifacts, servers, and the temp folder. Now, Pete pinged me, and I did actually find a bug in CommandBox where anytime you install the new package using the HTTP endpoint, it left the temp file in the temp folder where I wasn't cleaning it up after it was done. Because inside of CommandBox there's always finally blocks and catch blocks that try to clean up if something goes wrong. So I did have a spot where I just wasn't deleting it. So over the years of installing stuff, there would be files, and I used to try to wipe out the temp folder every time CommandBox started. But then that doesn't work if you have 2 CommandBoxes running at the same time. One's in the middle of downloading something, and one's booting up, and it tries to wipe the temp folder. Because the files are locked and they're in use. So right now, CommandBox doesn't ever blow away the temp folder, even though you're free to do it anytime you want. But I did at least fix a bug where crap was getting in there. Oh, the other thing that Pete mentioned was server JREs. If you fool around a lot with the feature of CommandBox that'll download Java for you, as I do when testing, test on Java 14, Java 11, Java 8, blah, blah, blah. You can easily end up with 15, 20 versions of Java downloaded onto your hard drive, and you may not be using most of those. And I don't actually know if there's a programmatic way to tell how recently those have been used outside of looking at the recently started servers. So what I have, like just looking at my local CommandBox install, I have 28 versions of Java on my hard drive, all from just me testing different Java versions. I have 4 gigs. I have like a terabyte drive, but still I have 4 gigs worth of Java installations that I don't know, I may use at some point, but chances are I probably only use a few of these on a regular basis. All right, someone needs to write that prune command. You have the technology, you can do it. I'll
It's
help you.
true. It could just be a module that then Brad will bring into the core, because that sounds very nice.
Well, I mean, because if you wanted, right, you could have a command that you run manually, like prune, or you could have it tie into the on CLI start or on CLI exit. So kind of like the update check that like once a day will just check for updates to your system modules. You could say once a week when I open or close command box, just automatically prune stuff. That wouldn't be that hard. Now it might take a few seconds if it's deleting gigs worth of stuff, but if you had it run every week or so, it probably wouldn't build up that much.
I'm just saying, CommandBox 5.1 prune. Actually, I have no idea what version of CommandBox we're on right now. That could be wrong.
5.2.
Okay, so in CommandBox 5.2, we'll have a prune.
Well, I think somebody should write it as a module, and we can talk about it, and then we can make it part of the core if we like. There's actually a handful of modules I've thought, should we just make these part of the core now? Like cfconfig, .env, host updater, stuff that like we use on almost all of our projects that we just install right off the bat. It's like, maybe we should just start bundling those. I don't know.
Alrighty. It brings us to the end of our blogs, tweets, and videos of the week. Let's move on to Find a Job. There are 3 new jobs this week on the getcfmljobs.com website. The first is a full-time position for a ColdFusion developer, and it's the NIEHS Grants Application Development, and that's in Mooresville, North Carolina. There is a remote position for a full-time ColdFusion developer, and then also one at Lexington Park, Maryland, for a full-time software developer. So those are the 3 new jobs. There are over 14 ColdFusion positions right now from 11 companies across 8 locations in 5 countries. So if you're looking for a job, go ahead and check that out, and we're very grateful for Get CFML Jobs for aggregating that all for us. Okay, moving on to the ForgeBox module of the week, which Brad is going to be pedantic and say is not a module, is our new Adobe 2020 beta engine.
Yeah, I was telling Eric, if we said ForgeBox package, it would be correct. But yes, the Adobe ColdFusion engine is, so whenever you start an Adobe server in CommandBox, server start CF engine equals Adobe, and it downloads behind the scenes before it starts, it's actually installing a package from ForgeBox. So every new version of Adobe ColdFusion, or Lucy for that matter, are all just a version of a package on ForgeBox. That way they can be versioned, they can be cached, they can be installed. So it says here we have 62 versions of Adobe ColdFusion on ForgeBox, all the way from CF9, 10, 11, 2016, 2018, and of course the public beta of 2020. So we update those automatically when new versions come out. By we, I mostly mean John Clausen. He's the one who takes care of installing the updaters into those whenever Adobe releases them, and we do that so you don't have to. Anytime I see someone asking a question on Slack or Facebook and they're like, I'm having troubles installing this Adobe update, I really want to reply and be like, use CommandBox, you don't have to install updates. Updates are a thing of the past. You just tell CommandBox what version you want, CommandBox gets it for you. You're done. Oh wait, no, I want to go back. Not a problem. You will never update your CF engine again. Just use CommandBox.
We're spoiled. That's what it is.
We're spoilt with a T.
Okay. The VS Code hit tips and tricks of the week. This week is an extension called the VS Code Format Context Menu. It's a great long name. The idea here is Visual Studio Code will let you format your files, maybe with Prettier, JS Beautify. There is no CF format yet. I'm sure John Berquist is working on that. But this puts a right-click context menu that you can click on a file or a directory, multiple files, and format those. So it's nice if you need granular control. You're not formatting all of your project right now. You can do it a file at a time.
So I'm curious if this extension has the logic for all the different supported formatters built in, or if it assumes you have another extension that provides whatever XYZ format it is you're looking for, and it just defers to it.
Yeah, VS Code has a first-class citizen of a code formatter, and extensions can register for certain languages. You can have default formatters if you have multiple, and so I'm guessing when you say to format a file, it says what language is this file in, call that formatter, kind of thing.
Okay,
So
but
if you had multiple, it would probably prompt you. I know I've gotten that a few times where it's asking me if I want prettier to format JSON or if I want the built-in Visual Studio Code formatting, things
multiple
like that.
registration. So I haven't tracked it. Is there a VS Code extension for CF format that gives it
There
first class
isn't,
citizen?
mostly because of the issue we talked about before with the language server protocol not existing yet. Every
Yeah,
time you ask to format, it would have to spin up CommandBox format and come out. It's just
it would work. It would
too
just
long.
be a little slower.
Yeah, well, and especially since the formats can happen either on save or on paste, and you can imagine
Oh, so it'd be
somebody,
like doing it on the fly then.
yeah, you can imagine somebody hitting a
Yeah.
bunch of commands, saving 4 times in a row or pasting 3 blocks, and their system kind of trying to catch up with the formatting.
Yeah, that would
So
suck.
let's get our language server protocol out there, Brad.
Someone needs to sponsor it. I would honestly love to like look at implementing that, but like I read a few pages of docs on it, and I was like, someone would need to pay me to do this because I would like spend an entire month, and I would not make any money that month because I would have spent the entire month figuring out how to implement the LSP for
Yeah,
ColdFusion.
I hear you.
Uh,
I remember looking at the docs and even trying to look at like the JavaScript one, and I immediately got lost.
I know. I'm
So
like, if someone was sponsoring me to do this, man, I would love to do it. But this is a rabbit hole of rabbit holes that while I would love to climb down in it, I have to also feed my family, which means I need to do work that someone's actually going to pay me for. But yeah, I mean, that would be so nice. Or I mean, even if CommandBox and more specifically Lucy's startup time from the CLI could be, half a second or a quarter of a second, so running a box command didn't have that like 3 or 4 second overhead, that might be in the neighborhood we could get away with it. But
yeah, I think we also mentioned or talked about starting up like a persistent daemon command box that could
yes,
be talked to. It's kind of the same idea as the language server protocol without matching their interface.
it
Which
is basically that's been on my horizon for a long time as something I wanted to look at. I think the technology is probably all there to be able to do it, but there's a lot of like complications and wrinkles that I would have to iron out to make it be able to work. So the first time you run a box command, it like spins up a box daemon in the background, which would just be a JVM process that would just stay running as it wouldn't really even be a service. It would just be some process that's running, and then future box commands would just phone out in some socket to that daemon and say, here, run this code, get the results back. um I've never I've always kind of hoped if I put it off long enough, Lucy would finally make good on their like sub 1/2 second startup times or something. But I've been waiting 2 or 3 years for that. So I might have to actually do that, get around to doing that someday. But yeah, that's always been out there as something I wanted to be able to do. Even Gradle does stuff like that. You run a Gradle build and you see it says starting up daemon, future runs will be faster.
Mhm.
um it's just there's a lot of
we
things I would need to iron out to make it actually work,
what we
and I've
need
never taken the time.
is more of you Patreon supporters or sponsoring this directly, and we'll get Brad on this.
I mean, it's true. Honestly, it is. I do mostly client work all week long, and I fit in little fixes and command boxes whenever I can. But yeah, stuff like the background daemon, which I would just love to have, is like again a deep enough rabbit hole. I never have enough time to spend on command box. I really have time to like climb down that rabbit hole, deconstruct command box, and rebuild it to make all that stuff work. And so it's that thing that I say, yeah, I'd like to do that someday, and I've been saying that for like a couple of years now.
We need your help to do it. You, the listener.
Uncle Sam wants you.
Okay. That brings us here to the end of our podcast today. And we wanted to take a moment to thank all of our Patreon supporters. These people help support our open source initiatives and ensure these great products like CommandBox, ForgeBox, ColdBox, ContentBox, TestBox, you name the box.
Quick QB.
Quick and QB, they are in boxes. Oh, I feel
Yeah,
out
that's
of
your fault. You named them.
Did I feel out of the loop here?
They could be honorary boxes like QB box or Quick box. Just
Oh no, people are going to start calling it now, and I'm going to get confused. But we want to thank you all. You can support us on patreon.com/ortussolutions. They go towards this podcast and our open source efforts. And we want to take a minute to read our supporters. So thank you to Ben Nadal, Brett DeLine, Carl Van Stetten, Charlie Earhart, Da Lee, Dan Card, Daniel Garcia, David Bellinger, Didier Lesnicki, Don Bellamy, Eric Hoffman, Gary Knight, Giancarlo Gomez, Jan Yannick, Jason Diger, Jeff McCain, Jeremy Adams, Jordan Clark, Joseph Lamory, Kai Koenig, Laxma Titrahadi, Mario Rodriguez, Matthew Clemente, Mingo Hagen, Scott Steinbeck, Sean Odin, Stephen Klotz, Synaptrix, and Yogesh Mathur. Thank you for supporting this podcast and Ortus Solutions.
yes, thank you very much.
All right, well, thanks for joining us today for the news. We'll catch you next week.
All right, peace out.
Show notes for this episode can be found at cfmlnews.modernize.io, where you can also subscribe to your favorite podcast player like Spotify or iTunes. We also have the link to YouTube to find more videos just like this. The music used in this podcast is under a royalty-free license from Sound.com and Blue Tree Audio.